I cannot thank you enough for clicking on this video today. It is your girl, Gypsy Rose Deville, dropping another chapter of my free unpublished book. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my channel, like and share this video, and click that notification bell so that you don't miss any of my content. This is a passion project of mine, and it has 3 layers to it. Part 1 allows you to get to know me a little better, and Part 2 starts the research of my zodiac sign and digs in deeper into the history of race and religion. So if you haven't done so already, I do suggest that you go back and read those chapters. And so, without further ado, this is Who Am I, the Capricorn, Secrets of the Zodiac, Part 2, Chapter 8. History and Religion, Part 2. Before proceeding, as always, I warned at the end of Part 1 that if you're easily offended by concepts that oppose your own beliefs, please do not proceed. I have a thirst for knowledge, and when I research a subject, I look into it from every angle, whether I agree or not. Please understand the following. I am not an expert. I am not a shaman or guru. I'm not claiming to have all the answers, nor am I coming with a selfish agenda. I'm just willing to share my journey and any knowledge I've gained along the way. So let's jump right into it, picking up where we left off. Of course, my mind goes to the obvious, race. Was this some kind of fanatical culture vulture situation? The brief timeline shared does provide proof that races or cultures have been blending for centuries. Coincidentally, you may have also noticed those in power becoming of lighter and paler complexions as centuries progressed. In fact, manipulative collaborations and forceful takeovers led to the rise and fall of most ancient empires. Another mind-blowing revelation for me was the fact that the original occupants of the Hebrew nations may have looked a lot more like me than I was ever led to believe. Having been forcefully pushed not only out of their land, but off the entire continent, indicated in the Bible and further proven with new evidence of enslaved Judeans being sent to an African port named Judah. And Egypt, which is an African nation, may have also been occupied with those with my likeness. Remember, Kemet means the black land, proving that we know nothing of our true history, not only as black people, but as humans. There are too many obvious spaces existing within world history, creating the opportunities for the corruption of truth that has us so clueless today. So are people of color being lied to about their origins? And if so, why? And why does it seem like the entire world has a vendetta against black people? Soon as I began asking questions like these, I came across a few articles containing various facts and theories, seemingly random at the time, but serving so much more purpose later. Darkness is to infinite as light is to consciousness. So I think it's only fitting that the remainder of this manuscript be just a little more conversational, just for the sake of clarity and just so that my intentions are not misconstrued. And please allow this to serve as the final warning before proceeding. I'm not going to make apologies for some of the concepts I am about to share, because I am only sharing what I have found through research. But I also know that some may be offended. So with that being said, let's get back to it. Melanin equals power. Embrace the dark, let in the light. Melanin literally has the power to create, allows the brain to absorb light, gives light to our central nervous systems as embryos sparking life. It has a wave nature, 5th dimensional vibration, affects individual vibrational energies, can be physical or electromagnetic. Found in layers of the Earth's surface, light absorbing, also found in space. Black nanodiamonds formed in space from heat and pressure have the crucial role of creating biogenetic molecules of melanin, which, along with amino acids, seed galaxies with life. Recently proven to also be found in the pineal gland, a gland claimed by scientists to serve no purpose. Now, according to spiritual doctrine, the pineal gland would equate to what is called the third eye. Now keep that little nugget in your pocket as I share this next fact. Those considered to be of African descent tend to have active pineal glands, whereas those of Caucasian origin have pineal glands that are more calcified. Early human migrations are the earliest migrations and expansion of archaic and modern humans across continents. Theories state they had begun approximately 2 million years ago, with the early expansions coming out of Africa and Asia. There are legends of ancient god races, such as Fomorians and Lemurians, giants who may have originated from Atlantis, possibly having 3 eyes at some point, and dark skin. A pure race with powers such as strong psychic abilities, who may be responsible for the various races that exist today, sharing secrets to their powers. They are now being linked to the true Aryan race, which never meant being Caucasian, but rather those who are illuminated or enlightened. Other cultures have superstitions, such as that which states that the darker the skin, the closer to God, going so far as to say that one has been kissed by the sun, or God. Starting to see any patterns yet? Well, let's keep going. Stone tools discovered in China suggest primitive humans, or a close relative, were in the region as early as 2.12 million years ago. The earliest evidence of presence of human ancestors in the southern Balkans, dated to 270,000 BC, is to be found in the Petrolona cave in the Greek province of Macedonia. The Epidema cave in Mani in southern Greece contains the oldest remains of anatomically modern humans outside of Africa. Science is now proving that Neanderthals evolved in Europe and Asia, while modern humans, our species, Homo sapiens, were evolving in Africa. It was believed in ancient times that Black people in Africa were among the first to come from the earth because they did not migrate to their land. This means all may have come from Black people, and a real fear for many is that one day all may return. Let's look at it from another scientific point of view. Alleles are representing genes. Genes are broken down by recessive, or lowercase h, and dominant, capital H. Dark skin, hair, and eyes all possess dominant alleles. Blonde hair and blue eyes all possess recessive alleles. By definition, this means white skin, blonde hair, and blue eyes are all a genetic defect. Combine that with the fact that Black people are often thought to be the first to become civilized as a nation and the cradle of science, and other theories deem them to be the original race, it is undoubtedly no secret why we are such a target. By nature, we fear the dark, and we have been trained to fear and turn against anything considered dark, be it physical or metaphysical. This was by design, a brainwashing tactic that shapes the mindset on a subconscious level, so much so that you will pass it down for generations. Don't believe me? Let's look into some of these dark terms versus their actual meanings, such as gnosis or mysticism. Gnosis is a Greek noun for knowledge. Gnosticism signifies a spiritual knowledge or insight into humanity's real nature as divine, leading to the deliverance of the divine spark within humanity from the constraints of earthly existence. Mysticism, derived from a Greek origin meaning to close or to conceal. One with God, that union with or absorption into the deity or the absolute, or the spiritual apprehension of knowledge inaccessible to the intellect, may be obtained through contemplation and self-surrender. Now, do either of these words sound bad or dark to you? Then why have we been taught our entire lives to shy away from concepts as such? Let's look at some other words that you and I both can agree were just forbidden. And once I share with you the true meaning, origins, or concepts that they derived from, I want to hear how you feel about it then. Occult, Latin for occultus, hidden from sight, to hide or conceal or to keep secret. Derived from the Latin word oculus or oculi, which means eye or related vision, and what we are capable of perceiving. Occultism can be defined as the hidden laws of nature or hidden knowledge. Science, religion, and magic originally were all inclusive, but forcefully separated over time, and magic eventually became condemned. Even astrology became classified as an occult science and heavily scrutinized. However, the majority of the elites in the world are occultists. Alchemy, transformation, experimentation, pseudoscience, an ancient branch of natural philosophy, a philosophical and pseudoscientific tradition that was historically practiced in China, India, the Muslim world, and Europe. Believed to only be achieved through the base foundation of duality. The philosopher's stone is an alchemist's key tool, believed to be created by achieving the balance of two opposing elements. Now, that doesn't sound much more than your average project at your local science fair, but I digress. Let's get even darker. Satan, which actually means adversary, one in opposition. Not a demonized antagonist, but one who is against the current agenda, eventually becoming a scapegoat for all things considered bad in this world. Scripture never describes him as bad, evil, a snake, or even deceiving. Diablos in Greek means separator. Now, before we dig deeper into the devil's meaning, I want to get back to that word snake for a second. Serpents were greatly reverenced in the ancient world and can be seen depicted in ancient writings and carvings in every culture and on every continent. Serpent means decipherer. Decipherer turned to deception. Snakes were a symbol of wisdom and considered being close to the divine, spiritually representing rebirth and eternity. Hebrew for snake is Nahash, associated with divination or fortune telling. Does the name Nahash sound familiar? I suggest you go back a couple of chapters. The serpentine shape even represents our DNA. In Hinduism, Kundalini, Sanskrit for coiled snake, is a form of divine feminine energy or Shakti, believed to be located at the base of the spine, in the Mahora. It is an important concept in Shiva Tantra, where it is believed to be a force or power associated with the divine feminine or the formless aspect of the goddess, needed to achieve true gnosis. There's even a theory about a 13th zodiac sign, represented by none other than the serpent. So the background of snakes go a lot deeper than we thought. Not only does it relate to something dark, but it also relates to something feminine. And that has power within itself that we'll talk more about later. But back to the devil. Lucifer actually means bearer of light. In Isaiah, he is described as son of the morning. Lucifer as a fallen angel was an original concept from Kemetic science as a positive expression of an abstract metaphysical concept where a new soul descends or falls from the heavens as light into matter. Religion flipped original spiritual concepts that were positive into something demonic or to be feared by believers. To give Lucifer or Satan so much power means God is not all powerful. And this is not supported anywhere in Scripture. Lucifer is only connected to Satan in the King James Version of the Bible. No other religion or ancient text. Heru or Horus was the original Kemetic concept of universal light opposed to darkness. So in my opinion, the idea of the devil is nothing more than a scapegoat that relinquishes us from our true power. The fear of the devil is what gives it power and traps us in the fears that follow us in life. Because now fear is known, we are left vulnerable to all the other negatives that life has to offer. The real hell is here on earth, when life is lived in fear without purpose, enslaved mentally and spiritually. The devil does not exist to anyone who has control of their own mind. What is a man without his mind? Baal, another biblical adversary of God, or Yahweh. Baal means Lord or owner, believed by Canaanites and Phoenicians to be the son of El, who was the father of gods, having dominion on earth. A fertility god that provided for humankind, sometimes pictured as a horned head like a bull, holding a lightning bolt in his right hand. Horns are symbolic of duality and opposition. Holding a lightning bolt signifies sudden illumination and the destruction of ignorance. He is often vilified as a false god, but may have been the original Yahweh, as known today in biblical texts. Baal was worshipped in many lands and known by many names, and was worshipped long before the biblical god. Over time, stories of both El and Baal became stories of Yahweh, reinvented, and eventually became one and the same. So as you see, we're not finding much evidence to any references to the devil being something that's really bad as we were taught. Now, the hijacking of history or the hijacking of lineages is another common thread you will see throughout this history project of mine, because it seems that this happened a few times too many for it to be a coincidence. But back to the story. OMG. Like I was saying, random as hell, right? But taking everything into account that I've been learning, in combination with these alternative views, was making something click for me. First of all, who knew that there was so much power in melanin? Am I the only one naive enough to believe its only purpose was giving color to skin? Yet, this omission of knowledge in itself proves an agenda to hide something greater. Once you begin looking into all things considered dark, you'll begin seeing common patterns of hidden truths. And before we go any further, allow my research to explain my loathing for institutionalized education. Imagine how much further we would evolve as a human race if we all took time to dig deeper, and how much more enjoyable school would be learning content like this versus periodic tables or Pythagorean theories that I never used, being purposely misled and left in ignorance by our teachers while having bullshit crammed down our throats that had to be memorized in order to pass a stupid test that only ended up in the damn trash can. For example, humiliating confession, I was grown before my ass had any clue that Egypt even resided on the continent of Africa, because they were taught to me as if being two separate, unrelated nations. So now, not only am I blown away by all the information that I was finding, but I also never imagined that it would get that insane. Looking at the information from a scientific or historical perspective, we no longer have humans originating from Africa, but also Asia and Europe. If this is the case, then who came first? Asians, Grecians, or Africans? Then, science is now stating that Neanderthal man evolved outside of the continent of Africa, while humans as known today evolved within. I'll drop one more nugget on you. Ancient artifacts are continuously being discovered on every continent on the planet, including America, proving evidence of thriving cultures with black inhabitants. Historical records can also place black people playing integral roles within some of the greatest cultures in antiquity. Finding evidence of black Roman generals, Egyptian rulers, to the Aboriginals of Ireland. Let's consider an alternative point of view for a second. What if race doesn't exist? Who's to say that ancient cultures weren't once a culmination of citizens of all pigments in coexistence? Pyramid walls in Egypt, for example, are depicting the people back then to have skin colors varying from midnight black to pale ivory. Kemet could have been known as the Black Land for valuing those of all shades, before the division of cultures by color. There are other theories that state in ancient times, those born with skin abnormalities were considered to be cursed, sick, or possessed. The Bible often refers to leprosy, which would be a way of describing those born with or forming white skin. be it patches or covering the entire body. These individuals were often ostracized and banned from the community, forced to leave their homes. Imagine if this is true and people were treated like they were less than human all because of their skin. I would imagine the mental breakdown one might suffer in this situation, creating a wrathful, envious, vengeful, and violent state or mind. Couple that with the fact that these individuals would have also had to witness the rise of the empires they left while struggling to even maintain existence. Taking a closer look at some of those dark definitions was revealing as well, bringing back memories from childhood when feeling ashamed of my interest in these forbidden subjects, like witchcraft, for example. This is considered the devil's work in the Christian community. Only now I have an understanding of the craft's true intentions, never being rooted in evil, but initially having the main purpose of healing. The art of allowing spiritual guidance in utilizing the amazing gifts provided by the earth to its every advantage. Have you considered that these subjects are only forbidden for the sole purpose of further suppressing our powers? And when you break down all things associated to the devil, you will find that he never caused any harm and has nothing to do with the evil of the world. How can he be to blame if we're being forced to believe that God is all powerful and created all things? All meaning good and bad. I mean, seriously, you really need to pick a struggle. That is not to say that there are not negative or evil forces in the world working against the greater good. But the problem is in allowing fear to give one entity so much power, keeping us trapped in ignorance, which is only due to our own lacking in pursuance of truth. Once a person understands their true identity, as well as their own power, they'll no longer fear any outside forces. So could this possibly be the reason Black people are so heavily targeted, holding key truths to the power we each encompass? And maybe the level of melanin we contain allows understanding of this power on an advanced level. Or what if we are the actual race that may have created the others? It would definitely explain the motive, which influences those who are less powerful for creating oppressive agendas in hopes of eradicating this knowing. Technically, Black women are the only race capable of birthing offspring of various shades, from ebony to albino. But as people of color, we also have to be careful when attempting to take complete credit for being the cradle of life. Otherwise, we would also have to accept that we may be to blame for our current existence. How did we get here? Being defeated and enslaved by those with less power? Furthermore, how have they been able to sustain this long if we outnumber them as a collective? Not one of these concepts can be explained without accepting some kind of responsibility. Another theory to consider is that maybe the Neanderthal man came out of the continent of Africa and migrated all over the world, but at some point there was an intervention that created the humans as known today. What if Black people received an additional alteration to our DNA, allowing elevation above any other species or race existing on the planet? Which brings us to the legendary god races from Atlantis. How did you feel about that concept? Here we have yet another ET theory. In fact, this was another common theme I was noticing, with many cultures referencing some sort of sky being. Now I'm always going to play devil's advocate, so I have one more theory for you to consider. What if we've been given the concept of alien intervention to deflect from one's true nature, giving us one more thing to fear? Or what if in translating ancient texts, the experts mistook the true meaning of sky beings? Whether on purpose or not, but you already know I digress. There isn't any proof to show that we are even receiving the true translations of these ancient texts, since there's only a handful of experts capable of doing so. It's not a secret that any information shared with the masses must first be approved by the elites. So until we begin to ask more questions or learn for ourselves, we will always receive filtered information. Sky beings could have been code for those becoming aware of a higher self, making them now capable of achieving things still unobtained today. For all we know, the first advanced civilizations may not have come about overnight, as believed by historians, but over time through spiritual journeys that led them to discover their higher power. With that being said, let's get back to religion. I believe that some of the religious doctrines used today were originally written from the perspective of those surviving periods of invasions. Imagine having your home destroyed by violent intruders, threatening that if you do not change your way of life, you and your family will die. I believe they may have been trying their best to avoid enslavement after having suffered the loss of their lands and loved ones, looking for ways of evading persecution, all while still holding on to the core of their beliefs and culture, which by now was mostly being passed down orally, since written records were constantly being destroyed, and those sharing risked persecution. These same people would even strategically infiltrate the political systems and gain immense power themselves. I believe that this may have played a factor to the success of entire empires and cultural lineages being hijacked and then redefined. Race and religion became a way to classify and identify those enslaved or oppressed. Then, the Romans began hoarding knowledge for themselves while suppressing true spirituality from the masses, using religion as their main tool of control. So let me give you a few examples. One of the main revisionists of the early Hebrew Bible, Titus Flavius Josephus, was actually a former high-ranking Judean priest, and maybe even a Druid, originally known as Joseph ben Mattathias or Yosef ben Mattathiu. Josephus, while imprisoned and awaiting execution, was smart enough to talk his way out of it by telling the Roman general that he had a message from God of the Hebrews, claiming to the general that God revealed that the general was destined to be the next emperor, giving Josephus privilege from that point on. Future generations would benefit as well as part of the Flavian lineage. So, he was a Judean, not a Roman, trying to avoid enslavement or execution, and, in his conformity, agreed to share sacred knowledge as well as rewrite Hebrew history. He was also a black man, if we're still classifying at this point. Oh yeah, and by the way, King James was a black man as well, but that's another story. And if you really want some tea, let me tell you about some of the main authors of the New Testament. So have you ever heard of the Piso family? The Calpurnius Piso family were Roman aristocrats who you can basically credit for Christianity, the church, and the New Testament, and all the characters included. This family decided they had the right to create a new religion based in Judaism because they were descendants of the Herodian Hasmonean hierarchy, which was the bloodline that appointed the high priest. Arius Calpurnius Piso's family members were all written into the books, some using aliases and some serving as more than one character, which include those that are known as the apostles or disciples as well. His relatives were a combination of Judeans, Egyptians, Persians, and Roman Greeks, such as Herod the Great, Julius Caesar, Cleopatra, and the Flavians. Notice the scripture, Romans 16:11. Salute Herodians, my kinsmen. That's not the kicker though. Joseph in the New Testament is actually a fictional version of Josephus, which is also the alias Arius Piso used to publish all of his writings. Face crack. He and his family, through years of marriage alliances, may have instigated the war against the true Judeans, who were actually their ancestors. It appears this family took the true spiritual knowledge of their culture and gave Christians a mockery version, all while assisting in the eliminations of others who also shared the true knowledge. You will even find that many of the inconsistencies found in the Bible stem from what are actually inside jokes shared within this family. Please believe, there is way more to the story, but I think you have enough to get your research started. So if you pay attention to the way holy texts are written, you can see how the authors were experts at writing in code, sharing many secrets if decoded, and often encrypting inside jokes as well. It was becoming obvious to me that I'd been taught a history that was not based in any factual truth. I began thinking about all those questions I try to ask at school or church, only to be shut down with no answers. Always feeling in my gut that there was way too many gaps in history that was shared with me, and honestly, this was a reality I was coming to on every level and subject in life, not just religion, but world history, human evolution, government, education, and the list continues. Now, this would be around that time I went through that period of cognitive dissonance because it was all just too overwhelming. Most of us begin our lives on a foundation of religion on some sort. So I was really in my feelings because the following questions were piercing my soul. Who have we been serving? Who is the true creator? Is the God who created the human race actually based on stories of Enki, for example, who later became demonized as Satan? Did Enlil prevail in the enslavement of humanity? Is monotheistic religion the first successful brainwash? Have we been putting our trust and faith in the wrong God? To figure out what God you serve, examine whether the God you serve does the following. Uses fear-based tactics to enforce obedience and conformity of the masses, teaches to judge others for not being as easily persuaded to conform, instills an insecurity of never being good enough or worthy and being nothing more than flesh and sin, keeps you in bondage with suppression and oppression of true spiritual knowledge, insists on submissiveness and long-suffering, insists on the releasing of one's own power to an invisible deity. What is God's true name? Does it matter? There is a theory called the psychology of knowing names, which states there is a power or sense of relationship that comes from knowing one's name. True mystics are aware of the power of thought. Thoughts create emotions, which create vibrations. Vibrations have their own level of energy, which have the power of manifestation. An Islamic Sufi sect practices a form of magic that is done through the invocation of God's many names. Ancient Egyptians understood that expunging one's name from history would impede their afterlife. Notice most biblical descriptions of Yahweh have close similarities to that of witnessing volcanic eruptions. Look up dirty storms and Kenite hypothesis. Exodus 19, verses 16 through 18. On the morning of the third day, there was a thunder and lightning with a thick cloud over the mountain and a very loud trumpet blast. Everyone in the camp trembled. Then Moses led the people out of the camp to meet with God, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. Mount Sinai was covered with smoke because the Lord descended on it with fire. The smoke billowed up like smoke from a furnace, and the whole mountain trembled violently. Genesis 19:24. Then the Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. Psalms 18. Smoke rose from his nostrils. Consuming fire came from his mouth. Burning coals blazed out of it. Psalms 18, verses 12 through 13. Out of the brightness of his presence, clouds advanced, with hailstorms and bolts of lightning. The Lord thundered from heaven. The voice of the Most High resounded. Psalms 97:5. The mountains melt like wax before the Lord of all the earth. Have you ever heard of an Ankh? Ankh means life, or key of life, is an ancient Egyptian hieroglyphic symbol that was most commonly used in writing and in Egyptian art to represent the word for life, and by extension, as a symbol of life itself. The Ankh is cross-shaped, but with a teardrop-shaped loop in place of a vertical upper bar, represents the beginning of all life, the creation. This may be where the symbol of the cross originated. To nail something to a cross is symbolic for nailing something from the spiritual world to the material world. This is just a little fun fact. Have you ever heard the word arepo? Some believe it means alpha and omega, which means beginning and the end. This word is found in what is called a Seder square, which is basically a two-dimensional word puzzle. It features in early Christians as well as in magical contexts. The earliest example of the square dates from the ruins of Pompeii, which some scholars attribute to pre-Christian origins, such as Jewish or Mithraic. Once solved, it reveals the word Arepo. There's a theory that Romans, who were secretly learning the Judean doctrines, used this symbol to inform others their whereabouts and existence. God means to invoke or to call. With that being said, let me show you some examples of the concept of God being used to the advantage of those here on earth. Amun versus Aten. Amun, one of the most prominent gods in Egypt's New Kingdom, and Aten, god of monotheistic worship. Both are examples of how God was used as a tool to gain power, prominence, and wealth. Changes can be seen in the names of Egyptian pharaohs as monotheism arises. Tutankhamun, King Tut, who is somehow related to Nefertiti depending on which historian you're talking to, changes to Tutankhaten. Between 1351 and 1334 BC, Amenhotep, who becomes Akhenaten, and Nefertiti are the first to introduce a form of monotheism. So you know I love a good conspiracy theory, right? There are theories which insinuate that Akhenaten might actually be Moses of the Bible, who has also been accredited with the installment of monotheism. There is an additional theory that Moses was actually murdered by the Egyptian magician, and his identity and doctrines were stolen and hijacked. Others claim Moses may have been Ramesses, whose name originated from Ra-Moses, which means son of Ra. So getting back to Aten, monotheistic worship or horizon of Aten, a mission to eliminate the worship of any other god. Pharaohs would begin declaring themselves the only connection to God and go so far as to declare themselves god kings. This would take the power away from the priests, who were prospering greatly as the ambassadors of their gods. He would instill the concept of the sun, which is symbolic for the actual sun, the one in the sky. The resurrection story derives from this Egyptian concept, believing the setting of the sun equated to death and the rising of the sun equated to resurrection. Prior to monotheism, the Aten symbolized the third eye, door to the spiritual self. Amun, however, or Amun, would eventually be declared the king of the gods, whose name means the hidden one, invisible, mysterious of form, and unlike other Egyptian gods, he was considered Lord of all, who encompassed every aspect of creation. Amun originally began as just the local god of Thebes, considered no more powerful or significant than the other gods, but represented the element of hiddenness or obscurity, while the others represented more clearly defined concepts such as darkness, water, and infinity. Originally, the supreme god of Thebes was the war god Montu, and the creator god was regarded as Atum, also known as Ra. Montu was a fierce warrior who protected the city and helped it expand. Atum was supremely powerful, self-created deity who arose in the primordial mound from the waters of chaos at the beginning of creation. Amun, at the time, was associated with protecting the king, but largely was simply a local fertility god. Amun, as the obscure one, left room for people to define him according to their own understanding of what they needed him to be. The priests of Thebes utilized the concept of monotheism to their advantage, eventually claiming Amun to be the king of gods, and gaining a huge following which allowed them to become as powerful as the pharaoh's administration. The priests of Thebes are responsible for the collapse of Egypt's New Kingdom, which ended when the priests of the cult of Amun grew strong enough to assert their power, dividing the kingdom. Monotheism also patriarchally removed any feminine principle from spirituality. In ancient cultures, there were many gods. Any being with any type of extraordinary physical features, ancient knowledge, militant capacities, or extraordinary powers would be considered a god. For example, possession or invention of technology. Martianism insinuates that the God of the Old Testament was a false God, and the God of the New Testament is the true creator who brought us Christ. There is a difference between the God propagated in religion versus the true creator. God in religion teaches us to be submissive, subservient, and suppressed, glorifying long suffering. God in religion would have you to believe you are helpless in this world, ruined by sin and not worthy. God in religion has several contradictions in his personality, instructions for man, and doctrines. God in religion displays traits of bipolar disorder and is hypocritical of his own commandments. He says, "Thou shalt not kill," then asks his followers to kill their own flesh. He himself wiping out entire populations due to their sinfulness. God in religion claims he created you in the image of him, makes no mistakes, knows what you are going to do before you even do it, and loves you unconditionally. However, you have to live, act, dress, speak, and think a certain way for him to actually accept you. God in religion wants you to believe in the devil, but that would mean that there is a power equal to God. God in religion uses fear-based teachings based on belief and superstition and forces strict rules and rituals. Now, the Creator views us as his greatest creation and loves us so much that he literally placed his very own power within us, wanting us to learn how powerful we truly are because of this power he placed within us. The Creator has no rules to be accepted by him and does not place limitations on potential. The Creator is all-powerful and has none as powerful as him. He created all things, good and evil. The Creator says we are divinely royal, having a personalized inheritance for each of us that he wants to bestow when we are ready to receive. The Creator is more concerned about the enlightenment and ascension of the soul, which only happens through experiences in life. The idea of God in religion relinquishes us of our true power. God equals love, but this alone can be self-destructive in that one will love God while equally fearing the devil, so much so that they completely become fractured in their own soul. To love God is to love yourself, and there is nothing to fear. The understanding of duality is key. You must learn to accept the good and the bad in life, as well as accept the good and bad within yourself. The Bible itself is symbolic of duality when comparing the doctrines and the God of the Old Testament versus that of the New Testament.